you became totally convinced that the way everything is in this universe and at this moment is absolutely right. And that's almost putting it too weakly. I'm not trying to talk about a sort of Pollyanna feeling where we say, well, this is the best of all possible worlds, and everything, however evil and however wrong, is going to work out all right in the end because it's a means to an end in some master design. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it is suddenly feeling that everything is right the way it is now, however appalling, however terrible. And you know it beyond a shadow of doubt. There are two other aspects to this experience as well. And although you feel them all together, we have to talk about them separately. While the first aspect is feeling that everything just as it is so right that you could say of it, this is why I'm alive. This is what life's all about. The second is that everything you see and feel seems to come to life in an extraordinary way. You feel the world as you've seen it before was seen almost in a dream. But it is as if just the ordinary things that were confronting you suddenly went, yeah, and came alive. And the third aspect of it is that you no longer feel yourself and what you are experiencing to be separated. Although you don't lose the feeling of the outline of your skin, you don't forget that I, or Joe Dokes, is a possible name by which you can refer to yourself. Nevertheless, it suddenly seems to you that your skin is no longer what divides you from the world, it's what joins you to it. What you see outside you is also you. Now, we ordinarily restrict the idea of ego, of I-ness, or of you-ness to some sort of psychological entity or process inside us which is in control of things. And we identify ourselves with a sort of controlling center. But in this experience, it is as if that center were suddenly enlarged to include the whole universe. You almost feel as if you were God, except that in Eastern thought, one doesn't think of God as a kind of omnipotent person. I mean, there are lots of people in our asylums who say, well, I'm God. I always like the story of the woman who insisted that she was God. And to humor her, someone said, well, if you're God, will you please explain how you managed to create the universe in 6 days? She said, I never talk shop. It isn't feeling God in that sense, as if you could do anything. But it is feeling that you and this whole world are one. And that in this experience of oneness and the sudden coming alive of everything, and the profound rightness, that's the only word I can use, the profound rightness of each moment, of this moment, however far it may seem to be short of one's ideals of perfection. This is it. And you say, having seen this, I can die content. This is what it was all about. Now, you might think at the same time that an experience of this kind is rather dangerous. I mean, supposing one did become convinced that everything just as it is the ideal, is right. Would this mean that you could go out and murder some rich relative in order to inherit their fortune? Does it mean you can do anything you like? You can kick your father and mother, you can be cruel to your children, that you can steal and rob and anything? In a way, it does mean that. But that is only to say, isn't it, that we are free. And freedom is dangerous. But yet, freedom is one of the things which we cherish as one of our greatest possessions and privileges. But if we deny ourselves freedom, then we don't really have the power to act morally. Because all true moral acts are not the acts we are bound to do. They are the acts we are free to do. But freedom is dangerous. The moment you teach a child to walk, you can teach it to kick its mother. The moment you teach a child to use a knife to cut up its steak with, the child can go and kill someone with a knife. Life is risky. Life is not safe. And so in the same way, this experience is not safe. But on the other hand, its content is so joyous that when people are profoundly happy, they are not in the mood, usually, to go out and slug someone. And so you might say, this experience, then, which is the foundation of these great forms of Oriental philosophy, that sounds wonderful, and I'd like to get it. You know, that reminds me of a story. Once a fellow was traveling in England, and he lost his way and wanted to get to a certain village. And he went to a country yokel and said, can you tell me the way to Little Tuddenham? The yokel scratched his head and said, well, sir, I do know where that is, but if I were you, I wouldn't start from here. And so in the same way, when one asks, how do I get this experience? That's not quite the right question. And to go out to get it is from the first the wrong approach. Because this sort of transformation of consciousness happens to a person only in the moment when you might say they give up grasping, they start to treat life not as something to be grabbed, when their whole approach to things is no longer clutching. You know, it was a basic teaching in Buddhism that the root of all human suffering is clinging or grasping. Just in the same way as I was suggesting on a previous program, that you can't cling to your breath without losing it. You have to let go of your breath. And for that reason, the word that is used in Buddhism for this experience, it's another word, familiar to you all, nirvana, literally means blow out. Don't hang on. Don't clutch life. And so one of the great problems is how on earth to get ourselves to give up clutching, to give up clinging. But you see, if that's something you eagerly want to do because you want to get something good out of it, this is still a grasping attitude. Well, you know, in Zen, they have a means of teaching people how to stop clinging. Zen, incidentally, is supposed to have been brought from India to China around somewhere between 400 and 500 AD by a fierce-looking gentleman called Bodhidharma. You can see him in this picture by the Japanese painter Soga Jasuku. He's always drawn as a very fierce fellow, with a twinkle in his eye at the same time. And when Bodhidharma came to China, he didn't have very many disciples, but there was one fellow who sought him out, and his name was Eka. And Eka came to Bodhidharma and said, "Sir, I want you to accept me as your disciple." Bodhidharma replied, "I have nothing to teach. What I understand is an experience, in other words, and I can't put it into words, and therefore go away, I can't teach it to you." But Eka insisted on being taught, and he waited outside Bodhidharma's cave in the snow. And if you look in the picture by Seshu, you can see Eka standing out there, and Eka got so persistent, and Bodhidharma so persistent in his refusal to teach him, that at last Eka cut off his arm and handed it to Bodhidharma, saying, "Look, here is the testimony of my sincerity. Please take me as your disciple." So Bodhidharma said, "All right, what do you want?" And Eka replied, "I have no peace of mind. Please pacify my mind." And by mind, of course, he meant his soul, his self. So Bodhidharma said, Bring out your mind here before me. I'll pacify it. But Eka said, when I look for my mind, I can't find it. Bodhidharma said, there, I have pacified your mind. And at that moment, Eka had his satori. In other words, he had the experience I've tried to describe to